Hey everyone!
Hello. Kylie, you look so different.
Oh, I do. And I've dropped my accent as well. My lovely accent. Unfortunately, it's gone. Hi everyone. I am not Kylie Carlson, but you may remember me from such COVID-19 webinars from last week, actually. So Kylie is there's very few downsides to living in wonderful rural France, but one of them is Wi-Fi sometimes goes out. And so I am here to interview my dear friend and colleague, Michelle Loretta. When she asked me to jump in, I could not say yes sooner. So Michelle, how are you? You must be keeping very, very busy right now.
Yeah, I'm doing well, but yes, it's a little nuts. But everybody's nuts right now. Is anybody kind of like just coasting through life right now?
I don't think anyone's just lounging right now, but I feel like, personally, one of the reasons I think Kylie connected us for our talk today is what people don't know is actually I've been a client of yours for about 5 years. And I have to say, my first thought after how am I going to homeschool my child was, I need to call Michelle Loretta immediately. So I'm sure there are other people in a similar boat here. Michelle, why don't we start in? Can you just give us a little bit about, this is, as we know, Michelle with Sage Wedding Pros. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do so we can catch everybody up here.
Yeah. So I'm a business consultant and educator on the business of weddings and events. So Sage Wedding Pros has been around for 11 years. We just celebrated 11 years. And yay! It grew out of, a mixed background of my years working for a big accounting firm in finance, sales and marketing, merchandising for Coach. And then I was a stationary entrepreneur as well. So
you've come from the biz. I'm sure you're thinking about your stationary friends right now with everything going on. So guys, today is meant to be a jam-packed about a half hour of we've got a bunch of questions to run by Michelle. Please go ahead and put things in the comments, put your questions and we'll try and tackle what we can as well. So Michelle, let's just dive right in with everything. We're just going to call it the coronavirus. I know it goes by two different names, but instead of going back and forth here. So let's talk about, there's so many folks talking about the coronavirus and us staying in and all the, why don't you dive into the short term, but also the long-term economic impacts that you're seeing from your side of things?
Yeah. So there's like three landscapes of time that we're looking at. Right now, we have the immediate, the coronavirus time, which we don't know how long that's going to take.
We don't,
right? So 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, right? Regardless of what that time period is, right now, our faucet has been turned off in terms of income, which is why our industry is really struggling right now. So the great news is that in the fall, winter 2021, that faucet is going to be exploding, right? So we have all these events that hopefully, ideally, are being postponed for later in the year or early 2021. So we're going to be very busy. And then what we're going to see, the third place we're going to see is stepping into the recession. And so a lot of times, a lot of people think that the recession is coming out of this. The recession has been kind of building up for the last 2 years. You and I have talked about this.
Endlessly.
Endlessly. Let's prepare for the recession. So thank goodness we're prepared for the recession as far as you go. So we're finally hitting into the recession. What's a little bit different is that like the faucet has been turned off overnight, whereas like the last two recessions that I've experienced as a career person and one as a business person those were kind of like a slow building up to that. So that's kind of what we need to look at in terms of our business triage, in terms of our cash flow triage, is how to make it through these initial few months where we have no income and then exploding with that income, but also work. Like operationally, we're going to be so insane once these postponements hit. And then the eventual thing of our industry hitting the recession.
Absolutely. It's something I think we forget about. It just hit me earlier this morning, I'm scrolling through Facebook as everyone is. And one of our cake folks she shut down for a couple of weeks. And then she said, but then the problem is when it all comes back, I'm going to not only rehire folks, but like I'm going to need more staff than I did before. And as we all know, there's implications that come with that. So, so you've talked about income. We all agree that's going to be the hardest hit right now. So and I think the biggest thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you saw it too, this happened overnight. Yes, you and I have talked about the economy for years. I don't think I've stopped talking for 5 years about an eventual down my chicken little kind of status over here. but this was overnight for a lot of people. What's the first moves for these guys with the instantaneous loss of income?
Yeah. And so that's where, if you don't have a cash flow strategy yet, it can be very helpful. And the easiest way to put one together is to look at when your payments are coming in the next 12 months, right? So if you are expecting a payment now in April or May, like look to see when that postponement is going to eventually bring in that cash. So create a 12-month cash flow plan at the very least, showing all the income coming in every single month and all the outflow coming out every single month. That's going to help give you some insight into like how dire things are immediately and when the catch-up period is in the fall, winter. So that's also going to help you to kind of see, like, can I spread out some of my payments, or can I ask my clients for more money right now? So this is something I've been encouraging people to do. I think not everybody is in a situation that's as dire as ours. Some people have stable jobs right now. I mean, if you're working in technology, you have a stable job. If you're working in medicine, pharmaceuticals, these are stable industries right now. So your clients may not be facing the economic crunch that we're experiencing right now. It's totally fair to email those clients, check in with them, make sure that they're okay, and say, hey, if you want to support a small business, consider making an advance on your final payment that's coming up in November. Any amount will help right now to kind of smooth out some of our cash flow, because as you know, our event industry is getting hit. I've been talking with several people about doing this, and I've been hearing really great things about people like, yeah, my client was like, oh my gosh, of course, I'm going to send you a check right now for a couple $1,000s.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So find a way to kind of word it in your company vernacular that's fun and friendly. But everyone is looking for ways to support. And let me be honest, like there are people that are not going to be able to do that right now. It's fine.
Yeah.
But some people will be. And again, we're talking about just smoothing out that cash flow so that you're not in such a crunch right now.
Do you think, a follow-up question, do you think there's a concern about exposing any sort of vulnerability by explaining it? Or do you think that since this is just such a crisis for everybody, that we're in a different mindset versus, asking at a different time? What are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. I think any other time people would be very nervous about, perceiving as asking for a handout. But I think right now the writing is on the wall. I mean, we see our favorite restaurants here, and I'm sure you're seeing that too, that are begging people for a takeout order. And these are like high-end 5-star restaurants. So no one is above asking for cash flow. Listen, you guys, this can be the difference of like your business making it through the next 12 months or not. So there is no shame in the game of asking for money right now, like absolutely not. Yeah.
You actually shared in a group that we're a part of, your B-Stage group, about the idea of offices, right? Because I'm coming up on a renewal.
Oh, yeah.
And you were like, you guys got to write them and don't be afraid to. So you're really empowering us.
Yeah, let me share that with your audience too, because that's another thing we need to be doing is if you are in an office space or your studio or kitchen or whatever, you need to go ask your landlord for either a rent reduction, a rent pause, some sort of like way to not be sending in rent at the highest rate that you are right now for the next, I'd say 6 months at least.
Do they pay on the back end? Is that the assumption?
Sometimes yes. I know there's one florist, again, it depends on what the landlord, if they own the building outright, they may be very generous with you. So I was talking with a florist that she's only responsible for paying the taxes on the building or on her piece of the building, right? And so that was a very generous offer. I have been hearing where the rent will just kind of get tacked onto the end or streamlined to like a 3-year lease agreement. So if you miss, 6 months, $1,000, it may be like an extra $500 out for, a period of time or whatever.
Got it. Just can't be afraid to ask. That's what you're teaching us right now.
You can't be afraid to ask. And if it is a situation where you don't feel comfortable, like if it's going to be too much for you to pay back at the end, then it's something for you to kind of like back up and consider as well. But and here's the other thing, like if you're a wedding planner, you don't need to be in the office, move out. You do not need to be in that space. Go work from home.
We're considering it. So
Yeah.
I think that's right. Like, do you have to versus do you not? It's almost
No,
like to
yeah.
take care
And
of
I
yourself.
know you have staff, but like your situation, you guys could move home. Let me tell you,
Love working from home.
there's going to be plenty of space for people to move back in 6 months. These places are not going to be rented out very easily in the next couple years. So
I never have to ask my staff to work with their cats all day. They don't have a problem with that. So what other expenses? Talk to me about, let's talk expenses first, and then I want to talk about generating income. What other expenses should we be looking? I know you and I do a tech audit every few months.
Yeah,
like let's go into that and other things.
That's where we go through all those subscriptions. And like, some of them are really tough calls. Like I had to go through and like take off my Instagram scheduler. Like that's $20 a month. And as much as I love the convenience of that, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna, I'll post in real time for the next 2 or 3 months until I can get there, right? You can probably cut out $100 a month from just subscriptions and software services, to be quite honest. The other one, this is the really hard one. So biggest expenses for any organization, from like a 5-employee company to a Fortune 500, it's always going to be, property or rent, lease, and staffing, sadly. So that's another thing that you have to consider. I'm not saying, go lay off your entire staff, but definitely re-examine how many hours. Because if you have 5 staff people and you take off 5 hours a week from each one of those staff people, it could be, a couple $1,000s every single month. That adds up to a lot. The reality is that a lot of people really do need to consider layoffs right now, especially if you're in a very vulnerable situation in terms of your cash flow. The other thing is, if you realistically don't have work for them to do in the next 3 weeks, you don't want to be paying a staff of 5 people to be sitting around without anything to do. So those are really tough conversations to have. Sometimes if you're laying somebody off, having them collect unemployment can be a better option for them than be taking a smaller, pay and things like that.
I'm going to ask you a question that is unexpected, but it's a follow-up, and just let me know if it's not heading in the right or something I need to ask someone else. So at least in bear in mind, we've got a global audience. We've got people from Scotland and UK today, which is great. So this is more of a North American-based question. Forgive me for the second, but you've got unemployed. You've got someone you lay off versus furlough. Can someone who has furlough still collect unemployment? Or
my understanding is not, and I don't know if Kylie has a place to like add some links. I have information on US furloughs that we can share. So maybe we can just do like a follow-up, maybe in follow-up email, she can send that out. So my understanding is no, you can't collect unemployment with a furlough. Here's something to keep in mind with furloughs, right? Every state is different, right?
Yes.
So you have to make sure that you understand the intricacies of your state labor department. And then if you're in another country, forget about it. Like it might be a lot harder to lay off somebody with people's hours. What I will share with you about furlough is if you have somebody that's salaried, which that's not a real word, it's actually exempt from overtime. So if you have somebody at a managerial level, if you cut back on their pay, they lose their exempt status, which to me right now, that's okay. Like lose the exempt status. What that means is that they move to an hourly rate. And then when they work overtime, you are required for them to work overtime. Now, in the next 4 months, nobody's going to be working overtime. It may be something that in the fall, you can put them back on exempt status, but that's something I'm not sure about. And you'll have to double check with the labor department and make sure that would be
Thank you for jumping in on that, because I know we've been throwing around, right? And again, to the audience, I know some of this is more US based, so we'll try and keep it more global, but was curious when it comes to that. Let's turn to the other side of it. Let's talk about supplementing income for a second. We're talking about, I think the inevitable, correct me if I'm wrong, the inevitable thing we do is cut where we can that doesn't hurt and then seek what's going to hurt. But there's also making of money. Let's be positive about this right now. I'd love your thoughts on supplemental. Do you know anything people are doing creative? Of course, we're seeing caterers and restaurants out there doing takeout, right? So what you want to speak to that?
So, I know pivoting is a really big piece of the conversation happening right now. I think pivots only make sense when they are in line with your current business model, right? So right now is not the time to be launching a completely different service. Like, so for example, if you're a wedding planner, probably not the best time to be launching a course. And I'm saying this because the development time it takes to get that off the ground is not immediate enough, right? So where you see caterers developing like delivery drop-off services, that's a great pivot because it's a line of the business that they can immediately make money from that. So it needs to be immediate. It needs to follow the business model with a shift in gears to what you normally do. So what I've seen, wedding planners doing is reaching out to venues and offering like relief services for clients who may not have a planner and need somebody to guide them through moving all of their dates, right? So essentially similar to like a day of service, but specifically for the crisis that we're facing right now. I've seen stationers, and some of the stuff like with stationers, I've seen will reprint, a notice for you. Some of that is being offered free too, right? So that's something we have to keep in mind as well. It is a little bit hard of a time to be asking people for more money.
Sure.
So you have to balance, like, where is it appropriate? If you are like a caterer, you're delivering a service, absolutely appropriate to be, asking for an exchange, a monetary exchange. Something maybe that's a little bit smaller, you have to make a judgment call because that generosity will probably pay off in the longer run if it isn't a big investment for you. So sending out a digital invite is not the hugest investment. Yes, it's time consuming, no doubt. But people are very vulnerable right now. And if you can kind of keep that in mind and be compassionate about it, that generosity, people are going to notice and you will get the business down the, in 2021 from vendors who are like, whoa, that was so awesome of her to like do all these reprints or, send out all these digital files to all my clients that needed them.
Absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%. And you and I've had these offline. Oh, by the way, I saw the coffee. I've got one for Kylie that's British. So I just want to, I'm trying to emulate.
You're channeling.
Not that she'd have the royal mug. I'd still be more like, but you bring up a good point too, because the idea of, and I hope people, I want them to take everything away from your smartness here, but also, people are going to remember how you acted during this time, period, right? And the fact is your generosity is going to be remembered very long time. And, we have to be careful not to be too opportunistic as well. So it's like, how do you find, and I don't know if there's an answer for this right now, Michelle, but like, how do you know the difference between opportunistic and genuinely trying to help? That's going to be hard.
And we're suffering, like, like I'm not even an event producer and my business is suffering. We're all in this very vulnerable place right now. I've been telling people you have to balance generosity, not at the sacrifice of your business continuing to excel. That doesn't change the fact that, again, going back to what we said in the beginning, like the faucet is off right now. There may not be a lot that we can do about it. There's little remediation efforts that we can do, but it's going to be a struggle. Something we didn't talk about, and I know this is one of the things that we were going to talk about, is lines of credit and financing options. This is an important part of the conversation. So normally, in the 11 years I've been helping business owners, I say absolutely do not take on debt for your business. It's service-based business providers, with the exception of rental companies, catering, maybe if they have big facilities they need to invest in. The certain segments, financing normally has been okay, in my opinion, but most business models in this industry, wedding planning, photography, stationery, you should not be financing your business with loans, credit cards, lines of credit. I'm going to make an exception right now.
Okay. I appreciate you expanding on it, because I think we all, but you're right, we don't. Well, okay, let me ask you. Yeah. So typically in 11 years of doing this, you advise not to take on debt for your business. I know it sounds obvious. Explain to me, the layman, why you, that's a sweeping advice.
Yeah. So with service-based businesses, there's only so much that we can produce every year. Like we have a capacity of events, right? So if you're a wedding planner, your capacity to make 20 events. What happens is when you introduce a loan payment or a credit payment that you're needing to make, a debt payment, it puts you on a further obligation to continue producing more and more and more to pay off that debt. If that debt payment is something small, let's say it's like $500 a month. Chances are we may be able to pick that up. But once we get into debt payments of $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, it's going to take forever to pay that off. And when you're paying the bank $2,000 a month, you're not putting $2,000 back in your business. You're not putting $2,000 to pay yourself or your staff or anything. It's very difficult to scale a business that has a lot of debt.
No, and you bring up a good point. Would you say under certain circumstances, if we're already running lean, when we get into better times again, could we stay lean in some areas to be able to pay that off? Like, is that the kind of thought? Okay.
So this is kind of what I'm advocating for people right now. I'm seeing this as a short-term thing. Now, granted, we still have the recession coming up, so you have to be watchful. But the things that you want to consider first are, in the United States, we have the Small Business Administration is allowing relief loans at a very low percentage of interest rate. I'm seeing something like
3.75.
Yeah, 3%, like really wonderful terms. So that's something for you to explore if you're in the United States. You have to see if you qualify. I think you have to have a couple employees or more. Like there's certain guidelines that you need to qualify for. That to me is the best option because that interest rate is really low and the term is long. Now, listen, I don't want a 30-year term in this industry because I want to be working for 30 more years.
It's so depressing at 30
right?
on my age. I'm like, ooh, I saw that. But
So you have to be
you can do it
realistic.
shorter. And there's no penalty.
Yeah,
There's no penalty. And for those in the audience who might be privy to this, I actually looked into the application in the last few days. And for just the warning to the people out there listening now or later that it is arduous. Like I think I got 98% through it and then it crashed like for 3 days. And so just have patience if you're here in the US. Obviously, globally, people, every country, they're handling things differently. So I really appreciate you jumping into that because there's always going to be that concern of where can I get relief and is it worth it to get that relief if it's going to put me in a worse spot down the road? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wait. So with that though, you at the end of the day though, regardless of whether you get that loan or not. And so number one, SBA loan if you're in the United States. Number two, look at a line of credit with your bank if the SBA is not going to be something, because line of credit can typically have a lower percentage rate than a credit card. Credit card is like, you don't really want to do that.
That's like last option.
So those are the three like in order. But let me tell you, regardless of which one of those you do, you need to know what is going to be your monthly payment. And you need to be realistic. Like, is this something that's going to choke my business for the next 10 years? No, if the numbers, go into Google loan amortization calculator, put in how much I need to finance $100,000 at 3% for 10 years. If the monthly number that spits out is too much for you to handle on a monthly basis, do not do it. Like you need to find another option because your business can't handle that for 10 years.
Yeah, no, that's right. You looking at the numbers, it can get scary when you think of how long you could do it or how much it would be. So that's great advice. Before we wrap up, because I need you to start giving us some words of hope here. Yeah. I know because they're way on the, but let me ask one more question because you've mentioned this. You're, and you and I have talked about this. You're saying with confidence that we're going to see a recession after this. How, and I'm asking you this because I know you started 11 years ago at the precipice of like the last, you and I, girl, we're 2009, like OG. Yeah. So what do you, if I may ask, what do you see is a change in couples as a whole as we hit the recession? I mean, obviously they're going to be spending less, right? But is there anything, whether it's the rise of DIY, like what are you seeing in terms of consumer habits that we need to be aware of in the future?
Yeah. So what happens during a recession is that, the luxury, the super, I'm talking about in the United States, $100,000 plus weddings. It depends. In certain markets in New York,
Dubai would be, in the countries.
Certain countries, like New York would be 200,000 is the high, super high weddings. So that market tends to still buy, they still have money, right? Like rich people always have money. So they will continue to have, very high-end weddings. They may just show it differently. So in the last recession, that's where we started seeing mason jars and barnyard weddings and those sorts of trends of simplicity. In the late 90s, in fashion, people were not wearing a lot of embellishments. It was sweater sets and, not a lot of like lines or geometrics or anything like that. So the fashion trends tend to go towards simplicity. What happens in terms of the middle market is typically the people that middle to high, right? So it could still be nice weddings, but typically what happens is maybe one person gets laid off or one person gets a salary cut. And so they all of a sudden go from like shopping at Nordstrom's to shopping at Target more often, right? So the middle falls to the bottom. That changes a lot of how budgets happen in the United States. Let me tell you something that's very different from 10 years ago. So there's There's certain segments of the market that were considered a luxury 10 years ago. So wedding planners, they lost a lot of business in the last recession because they were still considered a luxury. Right now, they're not. Like, wedding planners are definitely something that middle to high still do and consider a necessity. So we're not going to see that fallout of certain segments that we did last time. Okay. Something that we did see last time that I think is going to repeat, we're going to see smaller weddings. So guest counts get cut. So where you may have wanted like 150 person wedding, you're really going to stick to that 100 person wedding.
Got it.
Certain segments of planners, photographers, videographers, venues, not as impacted by that because there's typically a flat fee involved or a percentage fee, but it's for the thing, not a price per person. The segments that are impacted by that are caterers, florists, invitation designers, rentals to some degree as well. So certain segments are impacted by that price per head drop off that happens with a recession.
Makes sense.
Last recession, there was still similar volumes of weddings. There's still an uncertainty where people may push it off till they feel a little bit more secure. So we will see a little bit of drop off, but it's mostly that the budgets get smaller than the weddings going away outright.
It sounds like we're going to have to do a lot of adapting for those who were here the last time in particular, have to flex those muscles and start again. Let's wrap up with, first of all, thank you. So invaluable. All of it. Like, I know we talk 300 times a day already, but I feel like I learned you're like that girl again. I'm learning so much. Any words of hope, any words of let's end on a positive note.
Let me tell you guys, this is the time where like the cream is rising to the top. Like the superstars of the industry are really showing why they are as valuable as they are. Mm-hmm. So, the more that you can do to service your clients with compassion and I just have seen some superstars, people that have been, moving dates and rearranging vendors, working overtime to the point of exhaustion, acting as counselors, maybe therapists, all of this to like make our clients, feel safer and more comfortable in such a place where they feel very vulnerable. Their event has been, disseminated overnight. So that's the thing that gives me so much hope is I think people are really realizing the value of having a strong event team. And then also within the vendor community, people are taking notice of like, wow, that person's amazing what they do. I knew they were really creative, but man, when it comes to damage control, I want to do business with her.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
That's what I'm excited about. It's like, wow, the professionalism is really being tested here. And I'm just seeing so much magic coming from our industry. It makes me really proud to be part of it.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to end. Let me ask you, Michelle. Now, I know we're talking about not selling, of course, to anyone right now, but that's why I'm bringing this up. Okay. I am bringing this up to the masses. You had set up, and it's kind of perfect timing now, a cash flow plan class. And I would love for you to talk about it. And this is not Michelle, this is Megan Ely saying, listen, the first thing I did was go to my cash flow plan and go, what do I do? So I know right now we can't spend a ton, but there are people once we get through that rush with a little bit more downtime, unless you're schooling your children, of course, too. There's that balance too. But can you just take a moment, like as a personal favor to me, because this is how strongly I feel about it. Can you tell me what you've got coming up with cash flow plan? I'd love for people to know.
Yeah, I have a couple classes happening in April. Like you said, people may be in a really vulnerable place that they can't take that on right now. But I'll be introducing them throughout this, the spring, summer, fall. And then if people want to work one-on-one to have me help them develop their cash flow strategy, like I've done with you in the last 5 years, that's something that I do on a project per project basis. So
fantastic. I appreciate you doing that. I know it's kind of a weird time to be talking about it, but I strongly feel that people should be working on whether they're reading your great blog for free or figuring out, like they should be looking at their numbers. So
there's tons of free stuff that people can do on their own. That's the thing is like, and once people are in a place to invest in that, great. But like at the very least, go get 11 years of free advice on the blog. And
that's where they can find you best. Where else can we find you if we need to?
Yeah. So Sage Wedding Pros, SAGE Wedding PROS.com. And then those are also my handles on Instagram, social, Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest and everywhere.
Fantastic. Michelle, it is not lost on me that you're doing thousands of these a day and probably not sleeping. And so the fact that you took time out, I know it's your kid's spring break this week too. So the fact that you carved out some time for us, for the industry, it's very appreciated.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing my darndest to, save our industry. So yeah, thank you
thank you. Okay.
All right,
great. Guys, thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.